Thank you for your blue pants. They're awesome. Hi, everybody. Let's just set the tone for those watching at home. I'm just friendly. My name is Gary Larizza. I am a professional services engineer with Puppet Labs, which means I'm one of the guys that's like the hired gun. I go around, do trainings, I do consulting, on-site work, I talk, I do lots of things. I've been with the company since about April of 2011, so I've seen a lot of stuff. And that is what this talk is meant to be about. If you'd like to follow along at the home game, you can go to bit.ly/refactordance. It's just going to have links and things to things I talk about. When we go in the Q&A, I'll update it. It's a Google Doc. Pardon? You need permission? Are you kidding me? God, Google, I hate when your stuff doesn't work. Yeah, whatever. I'll go and add permission later. But that's kind of awesome that I went and I was like, oh, share the link with everybody. And yeah, not so much. Whatever, I'll do it later. So anyway, Refactor Dance, bit.ly Refactor Dance, and hopefully by the time you're viewing this, like, things actually work. So anyway, I'm also that guy. If you have seen this blog or all the blog posts and things like that, that is me. Which is funny because when I originally set up that blog, I chose Octopress because I could just write on airplanes and things where I am. And the title header I just kind of put up there because whatever, it was filler. And then when I posted it, it actually went live. And I was like, whatever. But now, so now, one, I don't think I can say the title with our new speaker code of conduct. But now I love getting introduced because this happens. Like I'll meet with salespeople and we'll consult, and they'll be like, this is Gary Larizza. He writes the Shit Gary Says blog. And so my favorite thing is seeing like Nigel in his Australian French accent actually introduce that. Whatever, there's a bunch of stuff up there. As for this is intended to be a hands-on lab. How? We originally conceived this as I was like, look, I've seen a lot of things. We'll talk about refactoring, the thing we're pushing people towards. You can't really hands-on so much that because I don't know what your code is. I've seen a lot of it, but yeah, I'm going to talk about a lot of things. I'm going to show lots of snippets of code. At the end, when we get to the workflow, the R10K bits, I actually have a repository you can pull down. If you have a VM and you want to spin up Puppet Enterprise and you can play around with it, go ahead. You can be very hands-on. If you want to come up here and touch my pants, that's fine. That's about as hands-on as we're getting for this, right? For this talk, I am going to be going from the bottom to the top. We're going to be starting with the very, very base things, talking about abstraction and separation, things like component modules, the base modules that are out there, how to write them better, how to take ones that you have created and burn them to the ground and use better ones, how to lay those out so that it just makes more sense. We'll talk about the data hierarchy, so separating all of your business-specific stuff from all the base component modules, why you want to do that, where you can work it, classification, things like that, the workflow, and then sticky points and caveats will probably be me just telling more stories and everything like that. So the whole layout of this entire talk is going to be basically something like this. The big box represents classification for a node, and each one of those stacks is a bit of implementation. Ultimately, that translates to, if you've heard us speak about the technology before, the big box would be a role. Each blue box there would be a profile. The yellow bits would be like component modules and parameters. The green bits would be like Hiera lookup. I don't know. It was late. There was color. I paid $500 for an Uber ride. And things like roles, application server gets a profile for Java, gets a profile for Tomcat, Hierarchicals, component modules. You name it. That's going to be the whole stack that we talk about. Throughout this, we'll definitely have time at the end for question and answers. I think I'm booked here for like 2 hours or some crazy stuff, but I get really bored. And I just want to talk about the important things. If we finish early, definitely ask me your questions on stuff you're doing, and we'll hit it up. I will stay here as long as there are people afterwards if you want to talk to me too. So go for that. The first thing that we're going to talk about, though, are things we call component modules. In my pretty little picture, they are the yellow bits. They are the base implementation for everything. When you go out to the Forge and you search for something, for Tomcat, JBoss, Java, Apache, whatever, that's what we're talking about here. It's a module that is a collection of classes that set up each individual bits of a specific technology. Those things. And I have seen a lot of them. In the early days of Puppet, the Forge wasn't really that good. And so people would write their own modules. Or they would say, you know what, I'm a big business, we have our own special stuff, like I'm writing my own modules. And the number one tip for people that say, how can I do component modules better, is stop writing custom goddamn component modules. You are not special. Your mother thinks you're special. But there are really good modules out there on the Forge now. There have been a really good community of people putting things together. Puppet Labs sponsors modules. We have people we pay to actually make these things better. The goal is to migrate the things that you have done over to modules that already exist. Because I know you do things like this. Seriously, I've seen this. We'll see all kinds of embedded data inside there. You're using some weird syntax that looks like a language I've never seen. And then you're putting semicolons in there. Nobody likes, well, Java people like semicolons, but nobody really likes semicolons. My point for all of this is there are better ways. Our goal is to get to some really, really good modules that are very modular, that have parameters separated out that you can treat like an API, and that do the things you want. The reason is there are way too many OK modules. If you don't believe me, go to the Forge and search for Apache. And when you have 3.5 days, because the search keeps going on and on, you'll pick the Puppet Labs one anyway, and then away we go. The goal is channel all that effort into making some really good base modules, which is what we're trying to do. Because get out of the business of maintaining and upkeeping modules. You should not have to do that. When a new operating system release comes out and they spill Rel 7 all over your screen, do you want to have to update your module to change paths or other things like that? There's a whole community around that. The goal being, let the community do the maintenance and upkeep, and you just pass in the data that you need. Like I said, you are not unique. Even big businesses that think they are unique are probably not that unique. And if you do think and you need that uniqueness, you're probably doing it not so right. In the case that you say, well, Gary, I have alternate install paths, or we put config files in different locations, that's awesome. Many of these modules allow you to specify installation and configuration paths. And if they don't, we can extract that. We have the technology. Or we use different custom packages. Awesome, you can pass a package name. I promise you, high five. If the module doesn't allow you to do that and you need it, consider adapting the module to allow for it. Because I assure you, if you think you're unique, there are like 80 other unique people probably within 100 feet of you. Other people who use that technology there. Also, you are entirely too lazy. I know you. Trust me. You just want to get stuff done. That's why you're using Puppet. You don't care about the how. You just care about the why. Do it. And a good and well-written component module just allows you to do that, right? Pass what you want. Let it ultimately happen. And one of the ways to get there is if you say, well, I still have to use classes that we already exist. I can't use modules on the Forge for some reason or whatever. Like, roll with me here and parameterize your classes. Welcome to 2009. It's green. I still go around and we'll see people writing classes that look a little something like this. We define a class, and then inside there we've got a case statement, and we're saying, if you're Red Hat, then we've got this bit of data. If you're Debian, then we've got this bit of beta. That's fine. That's necessary. But do this the right way. Parameterize your classes. Expand those out. Extract them out into separate parameters. Default them to a separate class. The idiomatic way now is to have a params class. And then in that params class, you can switch on the operating system and get different bits of data there. right? You can put everything in one place so that all of your subclasses will use that bit of data, right? Treat these parameters like your API. People don't care really about the internal mechanics of your module, but they do care if I pass a configuration dir, it's just going to get set on the machine. Or if I pass a separate whatever, it's just going to happen. So if you extract all of your parameters up here to the top, you can refactor the internal organs of your module without issue as long as it does the same thing at the end. That's encapsulation. Treat them like APIs, extract them as parameters. So when you go through all of your code, that's what you should be pushing to do. If you have custom bits of data inside your module, put it up there as a parameter. Give yourself a sane default inside the params class, and then pass in that specific data from a higher level, which we'll talk about very, very soon. Okay? Again, parameters are APIs. We're moving to sort of the goal of single entry classes. A lot of our modules aren't there, but kind of the goal is to say I want to declare this class, pass in the parameters for how I want it to happen, and then be done. A lot of our modules even don't allow for that right now, like the MySQL module has like MySQL : server, and Puppet doesn't right now necessarily have the concept of private and public classes, so you can say don't call this one, but just call this one. But migrating those parameters up to the top will allow you to just have a single entry point and then tweak and tune it how you want. Also, there is the forge test. When people ask me, am I doing this right? And I'm like, that's my car. What are you touching? The question that I ask is, can I take your module and put it up on the forge? And if your answer to me isn't, well, I feel embarrassed, but it's more like, well, we have specific bits of data in this module that I don't want people to see, I can't put it up on the forge, then you need to refactor that. That needs to go to a higher level. You need to make that more generic and then get those bits out. That's how you know you are on your way. So the next bits here that we're talking about are params and shareable data, because you have the Apache class here for params or whatever module, and we have that params class. And again, I mentioned it before, we can case on OS family and make changes here. That is the right place for that bit. We're going to be talking later about Hiera and OS family and things like that. But for your modules, the data that should be inside your modules, excuse me, because people ask me, how do I know whether to put this in a params class? How do I know whether to extract it out into Hiera? Like what goes where? So here's the goal, is that any bit of data that is not super secret sauce should be in the module and shared out. Like the name of the Apache package on Debian ain't no class secret here, all right? Other people can use that, embed that in, put it in a params class. Things like maybe your SSH keys or maybe your, if you've got certificates or SSL certs or anything like that, that goes a little bit higher, or that information can be locked away. But in general, shareable data, OS-specific data does not equal private data. We'll talk a little bit later about Hiera. And if I open up your Hiera hierarchy and I see OS family in there, I'm going to cry. It should not belong there. It does not belong there. I'll get to that section later. Your params class should have sane defaults, right? Default over to sane something that just makes sense. And again, things like OS variances with packages, you can't go wrong there. And then finally, validation, which leads us to validation, which is just not whether people like you. It's more what should be passed in. Luke actually talked a bit about this earlier, about where we're going in the future, but we see a lot of this, right? Confdir, we default it to a same default. We default that to a same default in the params class. What if I pass in something for confdir? Well, in this class, we're just declaring it as a directory. Boom, it's going to happen. There's no validation here. Did you pass a path? Did you not pass a path? Were you just typing with your feet? How do we know whether it's going to work? Because if you pass in a bad bit of data and it gives you a Puppet error, it's going to point to this line, like right here. And people using your code are going to go, what the heck? I don't know what happened. There are better ways to do this. And these would be the validation functions. Currently, as of today, Puppet Labs has the Puppet Labs standard lib. And inside there, we have a lot of functions that are really handy, of which probably the most important and useful ones, they begin with the word validate. In this case, validate absolute path makes sure that it is a path. And guess what? It also works in that magical land we call Windows, where all the slashes are the wrong way, and mice galore. It works like that. And if you throw a bad path, it gives you a pretty little error message that Jeff McCude made because he's anal like that. So allow it to happen. Don't pass in bad data directly to file resources, or you will get bad things happening. That's basically the focus on that side. Look at the functions in the Puppet Labs standard lib. All of them begin with the word validate. Validate regex, validate path, validate boolean, string, array, whatever. They're all there. And again, don't just pass unvalidated data directly to resources, or you are bound for bad things to be happening. Okay? Let's talk about a subject which is a pain to describe. Something called class containment. Class containment is also known as the thing that's the reason why we have this thing called the anchor pattern, right? Consider this for a second. So we have this class, and this actually exists, MySQL : server out on our Puppet Labs repo. There's a bunch of params we inherit from there, but then we include subclasses. So this is our pattern, this is our style going forward. We have a separate subclass to install the bits, to configure the bits, to ensure the service, and everything like that. The first thing you need to know, though, is the include function over there. So the include function is idempotent, and by that, I mean you can include it, and the first thing that function does is check and see if that class is already in the catalog. If it's not in the catalog, it puts it there. If it's already in the catalog, it says, okay, whatever, you're there, I back off. No harm, no foul. Okay? So consider we have this class which includes other classes. But let's say you have other classes which also try and include MySQL Server install, MySQL Server config, right? We've included them in many places, and I've already established that it works. Puppet says, oh, it's already in the catalog, my bad, you know? But do you know which class ultimately was responsible for putting it in the catalog? You don't really. So the concept comes up is that say you have this MySQL : server class with a bunch of resources, and then we've also included classes. And say you have something like Apache, and you want to order it, and you say MySQL : server should come before Apache. Cool. Well, it's your expectation that MySQL : server includes everything between that curly brace and that curly brace. But to Puppet, that's not the case. Inside that curly brace to that curly brace, all the resources are considered to be contained inside there, because what do you know about resources? What if you try and say, like, user Elvis ensure absent, user Elvis ensure present? Does Puppet work? Does Puppet throw an error? It errors because you have duplicate resource declarations. If you say include Apache, it just works, right? So resources live within this boundaries, but when you use the include function here, Puppet does not consider these classes to live inside MySQL Server. So what happens is, if some class says MySQL Server should come before this class, sometimes things happen in that order, but then maybe Apache declares, and then some MySQL Server stuff goes down here. And people go, wait a minute, I ordered MySQL : server the entire thing before. What went wrong? The problem is this whole containment in the include function. So in Puppet, before version 3.4.0, we introduced this thing called the anchor pattern. And an anchor is just a BS little resource. It's nothing. It's meaningless. It's in the Puppet Labs standard lib. But what you can do is it allows you to draw a net around classes and consider them to have been a part of this class. So here we say declare this resource, and then order it before any of the classes, and then declare that resource. You put an anchor before and afterwards, and when you do that, Puppet now respects that these classes are considered to have been contained inside this one. The end result is, when you do it like this, when you order MySQL Server first and then Apache second, it just works. right? But it was ugly, and it required all these additional lines, and we didn't like it. So as a Puppet 3.4.0 or greater, we introduced a function called contain. The contain function is the same thing as include, but it tells Puppet that this class is considered to be contained inside MySQL Server. The end result is, if you just do this, when you order MySQL Server before something else, like Apache, it works. Basically, that really long story short, do that. Like if you declare classes within subclasses instead of this. You can still get yourself into errors, because what if you use the contain function in another class on the same thing, and then you try and create a circular dependency? Well, Puppet will allow you to do it, but then it's going to throw a circular dependency. So that's the deal there with class containment. Before Puppet 3.4, use that dirty thing called anchors. Afterwards, use the dirty thing called contain. Question?
So if you contain some class and then there's more includes in there, what happens?
So if you do contain for some subclass, and that subclass actually declares classes below it, what happens? You have the same problem, because they're using include in the subclasses. So you must use contain when those classes are considered to be a part of other classes. That's how you have to tie it together. Okay? That's the deal. There's a really good blog post that is in my Google Doc that you can't access because I don't know how to Google. See it later. It's on our blog post. It's really well done. Let's talk about Hiera. By the way, that is Hiera. We say it like Hiera. It's the first 5 letters of the word hierarchy. So however you say the word hierarchy is how you pronounce it. It really isn't that hard. But everywhere I go, people are like walking on Hiera? No. And the guy that built it, Ari, is South African with other accents mixed in. And he says hierarchy. He's wrong, is what he is. And it's a pity because he's been wrong for so long. I hate to tell him. Yeah. So Hiera. Does anybody have no idea what Hiera is whatsoever? Awesome. Hiera is a car that I built. No, cool. Who is actively using Hiera right now? High five and stuff. All right. So Hiera is a mechanism by which you can extract data from all your Puppet code. Because typically we used to run into this. We would say, OK, we've got this class. And consider this as like Tomcat, class Tomcat. And we're saying, based on your application tier, and what I mean by application tier is like dev, test, prod, stage, UAT, run, QA. Keep just more acronyms in there. If you're in the dev tier, the version of Java we use is this, and the version of Tomcat is this. If you're in test, we use this Java version, we use that Tomcat version, right? So in your modules, the code that you would write, we would get this crap littered all over the place. And this would be why modules wouldn't be able to be reusable. Because people would say, well, I don't have application tier. I don't host applications. I don't have a dev or a test or a prod. Let me strip that data out of there. And it tightly coupled your business logic into your modules, right? So that now you had all this littered data. Well, what Hiera did was allow us to take all of that logic and just pull it out. So now you can say, Java version is, hey, Hiera, give me Java version. And then Tomcat version is, hey, Hiera, tell me what the version of Tomcat is. Ultimately, Hiera itself became that big old conditional statement that allowed you to check and get data based on what kind of a machine it was. So in this case, to configure Hiera, you set up a backend, a directory. In this case, we're just putting data in YAML documents. And the hierarchy works like this. We would say in Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet Hiera data, there's a nodes directory. First, look and see if there's a file for this specific machine, because it's a unique little snowflake, and we need unique versions there. And if you find it, go ahead and exit. Else, San Francisco uses different data from Philadelphia, so use this version in San Francisco, use this version in Philly. Else, dev uses this version, prod uses this version. And then finally, common is just like defaults. So basically, you were able to strip out this conditional logic and throw it in another project that somebody misnamed and mispronounced. So that's what it did. And it's really, really cool. It works really, really well because you can then just say, look, in dev, Java version is 7, Tomcat version is 8. It's YAML. It's structured data. It's really easy to use with a giant asterisk because don't include spaces in the wrong place in YAML. And don't have 2 dashes instead of 3. And don't have 4 because things will explode. But it's easy. I could write a whole configuration management platform on YAML, and then I'd be insane. So that is what it allowed you to do. But the problem exists. Hey, where's our friend OS family? Where's like Red Hat, right? Where's Debian? And I would like to publicly apologize for sins in the past. One of the first things we did when we wrote blog posts about using Hiera was we were like, cool, set up OS family. And now you can say Red Hat.yaml is this, Debian.yaml is that. The problem is, when you introduce operating system into your Hiera hierarchy, you introduce a world of pain. Because one, that data is not specific to you guys at your organization, like I mentioned before. And two, Red Hat begs to differ. Between versions 5 and 6, there are differences. And between versions 6.2 and 6.3, there are differences, right? So when you do that, you all of a sudden have to be like, operating system / release version major / release version minor, crazy, crazy things like that. We do not recommend that. In fact, any engagement I've gone on where I've seen people introduce OS family into the Hiera hierarchy, I have cried a little bit. I haven't actually seen a really, really, really good need. If you show me a really, really good need, I will give you a high five and dance for you because I have a $500 Uber bill to pay for. And 50 cents to split it. What's an application tier, you ask me? You say, why do you say application tier? We call that our environment. It's the dev env, the prod env, right. Well, we here at Puppet Labs suck at naming things. And in this case, I will give us all a pass because this is just an overloaded term. How many ways can you call this thing an environment? So we have two separate concepts that have pretty little boxes here. You have Puppet environments. Puppet has the concept of an environment, which just a Puppet is an entirely separate module path. That's it, right? Different modules so that you can test it out. Puppet environments are meant to test changes to your Puppet code, right? So before you roll out this Puppet code change to like everybody, let's make the change here and let a couple of nodes like try it out, right? That's what it's there for. Puppet environments are meant to be really, really short-lived. It's like split one out, do some Puppet code changes, test it on a couple of our key nodes. If it works, awesome, merge those changes in, right? And then kill off the separate environment. They have a migration path to production. It's like when you split off an environment, it is intended that eventually it's going to go be live one day, or else you're going to trash it and try again. It's adjusting the model, the thing that you use, the manner you set up this thing. Because in reality, depending on your dev, test, prod, stage, whatever, the way you set up a piece of technology should be exactly the same in dev as in test. But the differences about those things are bits of data. Things like the version of Java over here, or paths to like host names or VIPs or anything else. Application tiers, which you guys call your internal environment, they're usually long-lived, right? You put a node, it's in dev, that thing lives in dev. You don't just one day say, let's take one of our dev nodes and move it over to prod, right? That don't happen. Hell, that node's been there for like 6 years. You can't touch it. Application tiers are meant to be longer lived. The data is usually separate. It is just data bits that are different between the thing. It is the data. If I could say data more, I would probably do it. That's what we're talking about. They're two separate concepts. And frequently what would happen is people would conflate them, and then big, bad things would happen. They would create Puppet environments for every one of their application tiers, dev, test, prod, QA, whatever. And then you would run into the problem where I need to change my Puppet code. So I need to test it over here in dev. So we create an environment called dev-Gary's test or some shit. And then all of a sudden, those changes would also need to go over to test and also to prod and also to QA. So you'd need to like cherry pick those over there, and bad things would happen. That's how you know you're conflating two separate things. You want to split them out. I have seen really good use cases for people to actually create Puppet environments after their application tiers, but that is usually over 5 drinks, and I'd forgotten what they were talking about. There are reasons, but just follow me there. So the deal is, when you set up Hiera, here's the bits you want to talk about. How is your hierarchy different? People will ask me, how should I set up my Hiera hierarchy? Like, I don't know. Like, what do you guys do? Think about, and the first question I ask them is, how is your data different? They'll be like, well, we have 2 data centers. And so this data center uses this. Perfect. Location. Create a custom fact called location. Let's use Hiera to split on that. Keep going. And they'll be like, well, like in dev test or prod, cool, we've got that down. We've got a DR site versus a regular prod site. Find and extract the things that are different about your organization, and then find out where specifically those bits of data are different. That's what your Hiera hierarchy is meant to be. Now, with Hiera and the hierarchy, you can also do things like this. You see how I have folders in here. Because literally, this just gets concatenated onto the end of this. Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet Hiera data /nodes / and this was resolved to be the node name. Sometimes people will say, okay, I have differences where, like in San Francisco dev, we do something really entirely different. But then else dev is the same way everywhere else. So you can actually create layers of your hierarchy that are like just % location to say this will resolve out to be like Philly or San Francisco or Ohio, and then / application tier. So that you can have a folder that says like Philly /dev, right? That is more specific than just location or just application tier. So you would put it higher in the hierarchy because that is a very specific thing. In general, your hierarchy should read from most specific to least specific bit. And sometimes bits of data aren't going to clash at all, right? Like, are you going to have a Java version that's different in one location from the other? Probably not. It's probably going to be based on dev test or prod or whatever. So you're probably only going to enter it into that one bit of code. In general, start from most specific and work your way down. Because if you don't know where to put it in the hierarchy, 1, you're just going to be wrong anyway. I promise you. 2, think most specific to least, and that'll usually solve your problems. Also, folders are your friends, really. Because look, this is Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet Hiera data. You could just say client cert or location or application tier, but then you got a whole folder full of files, like dev.yaml, qa.yaml. And who knows, you could open up a data center in like dev Nebraska or something, and then you have namespace collisions, like the folders are your friends there. Those are usually the recommendations that we have for structuring Hiera, other than, you know, use it. Cool. So those bits of Hiera data are there. They are layered and passed the top to component modules. Now we come to something we call profiles. Profiles is like where you'll be working the majority of the time. Because all a profile is a wrapper class around how you guys set up a piece of technology, okay? It is a technology-specific wrapper that allows you to treat Puppet classes kind of like libraries. Like when you're doing a script and you just say like import or include some library or whatever, you just consider it to be there. That's what profiles are. You want to be able to just say, you know, include profiles : MySQL server, and you'll get everything set up. Like you'll get it set up, you'll get all the bits of data that are different, whether you're in dev or QA, all the dependencies for MySQL will be there. It's just like boom, done. That's what a profile is meant to be for you. But first, a question, and I've trained a couple of you, so you better know the answer. This, include Apache versus the parameterized class declaration syntax of Apache. Are there any differences between the two? Because usually, I'm going to answer my own question. I'm vain, don't worry. Usually, in our documentation, you will read and see, oh, it is functionally identical between the two. And in reality, in the end, they both are meant to put the Apache class and dump all of its resources in the catalog. But there is a little difference about them. And one of them is this. When you say include Apache, it's idempotent. It's a function. It checks. So if you do this in a manifest, will this work? Yeah, because it says the first time it hits it, it puts it in the catalog, and then it backs off the other time. Because again, Puppet is a declarative language with asterisks and fingers and all sorts of things. But in reality, the parser, the evaluator, the thing that reads our manifest, is reading from the top to the bottom. Hate to tell you, right? What about this? If you see this in a manifest, does this work or does this throw an error? That'll work. Because the first is the parameterized class syntax. It just puts the stuff into the catalog. The second time, the include function backs off. It says, OK, it works. It's good. Does that work? Heck no. I've trained some of you. It doesn't. This puts it in the catalog. This is a honey badger. It don't care. It's trying to put it in again, and then it fails. You get a compilation error. But the problem is the include function's idempotent. We like that ability. We like to just be able to include stuff all over the place because we're lazy. But how do you pass a parameter to the include function? Hiera, don't get ahead of me, sir. You don't pass parameters to the include function because it's idempotent. If you passed a parameter here to the include function in there, it wouldn't know which one to do and it would cry. So we intentionally made it not be able to do that. When we introduced parameterized classes in 2.6, we had to introduce this syntax because this allows you to pass parameters to a class so that you can have differences. So fundamentally, it can only show up once inside a compiled catalog, or else you get an error because Puppet doesn't know which one to choose. There are bugs open, there are topics about if you use the parameterized class syntax twice in a catalog and they have the same parameters, should Puppet really throw an error or should it not? And you can go and comment on those. I don't really have too much of an opinion. But right now, they don't. Okay? So beware. And then the ultimate goal is we'd want to have the ability to pass parameters to a class but also make it idempotent. And that's where we're going. So let's talk a little bit about this bug too. Right? You'll notice all of these slides are things I hate. And later on, there'll be people too, because really. Sorry, I'll turn the camera off or something. Name spacing, name spacing, name spacing. So consider this. You've got a class here where you've said $Java version is do a Hiera lookup, and then you notify it. Java is Java version. Now, the variable here will populate because of two things. One, we declared the variable before we actually referenced it, because again, Puppet reads top to bottom, so it works there. And two, due to Puppet's relative referencing. This variable is found inside this scope, so it refers to it. It's also the reason why you can declare like OS family inside a class and refer to it, and it won't be the fact, as long as you refer to it as just that. Because in reality, the actual fully namespaced variable is $data encode : Java version. But Puppet wants to help you out and say, look, if you just refer to it as the short name here, like I'm going to know what you're talking about. It's cool. Like, don't worry. So we don't have to write fully namespaced variables. And then we get to something like this. When we talk about profiles, we create one, like in this case, profiles : Jenkins. And then inside there, we include the Jenkins class, which we want to be the component module. It's probably our Tyler's because it's cool and it does plugins and Chuck Norris and like, yeah, the build worked. But there's a problem. And the problem is due to the relative namespacing. Because look, include Jenkins, and this scope level is profile : Jenkins. And look at this guy, Java version, but it's actually data encode : Java version. Do you see where I'm going? So the problem is, in more recent versions of Puppet, when you do this, Puppet throws you an error and says you've already declared this class. What's happening is it thinks you're talking about the current class that you are already in because it speaks computer and you don't, right? Which is 90% of my problems of my dating life. Profiles, : Jenkins, include Jenkins. So what did you actually call? You called yourself problems in dating life. What you really want is include : Jenkins, because that : is the namespacing operator. It's telling us go to the top scope and look for a component module up there. You're fully namespacing it. So when you see us using this syntax, it's not because we're really hot for colons. It means that we really don't want Puppet to screw this up, right? So it's something we're looking to fix. If you look at my blog post about roles and profiles, I link directly to the bug. And it's a bug, but it's just in our understanding because Puppet's a computer-based thing. Go check out that. But just so you're aware of it. Data separation. The golden days of data separation. We've talked about this, right? Case application tier, blah. And we've already said that this is how you solve it by doing a Hiera lookup and passing it to parameterized classes. And this is really what a profile is meant to be. Everything you need to set up a piece of technology goes in the profile. We do the Hiera lookup, so we're getting specific versions. Remember, conditional check based on dev, test, or prod. And then we declare the component modules inside here, and boom, you're done, right? The profile now becomes the entry point. We now have a wrapper class that doesn't have parameters here. So we can use our good old pal, the include function, by including the wrapper class. It's idempotent, which is awesome. You also get the parameterized class syntax to be able to pass parameters, and you get Hiera, which is the ability to get different bits of data. This is kind of like everything we really wanted when we structured it out. And that's how it should be set up when you have this data separation. That's what your profile should ultimately end up looking. Now, we're going to run into a problem with this guy, which we'll talk about in a second. But also consider this. So I talked about it before. Some of your modules that I've seen you write have things like this. Oh, we wrote an Apache module that includes our custom keys, right? Or things that don't actually belong in the Apache module. Custom bits of MyCorp uses a file that we touch here that we know how to because we don't know how to computer. Those things are your bits of data. They're your proprietary things. They don't belong in the base component module, but they do belong in the profile. Because again, the profile is your implementation. That's where you can put on your add-ons. So in the profile, you include the base Apache class. You do a Hiera lookup for your path to your keys. And then you declare all your individual files using that, and you pull them from the module. But, and I can already hear you thinking, say, well, Gary, profiles is just a module. Like, that's what it is. Now, we have an Apache profile, but you're telling us to use custom bits of data there? So the profiles module is going to have like a files directory with just tons of crap in it. And for every different profile we have, they're going to be littered. And maybe I don't want people to see my CA or my keys just because they're in here. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, I don't know, a voice in my head. You should probably consider what you're doing. In this case, if it is just a quick little small file, I don't care if it's in the profiles module. You probably don't too. Put it in there. But if you have a lot of customizations where you have sensitive data, or you need something segmented, or you know you're going to have like 50 of these darn things, you don't want to put them in the module, create a separate component module called like mycorp_apache_customizations, embed it in there, give yourself your own separate repo, include that in the profile up here so that it actually happens, all right? Both of them functionally are the same. You will get the stuff on the machine the way you want it. It's just how you lay it out. And I can't answer that question to you because it's up to however you want to hide it from people in your organization. But do it. The profile is the place for all your customizations that you don't think belong in the component module because they don't. So let's talk a little bit about dependencies. In the olden days, when you would do things like this, we would create a Tomcat module. Oh, it's like 218, by the way. Deepak, Giridhar Gopal, the guy who created PuppetDB, talks at 220. If you're really interested in PuppetDB, go see him. You won't hurt my feelings. He's funny and does like 80s cartoons. So anyway, sorry, I just didn't want to bore you anymore. The base Tomcat class that you would do before is you would have these issues where, okay, we want to set up Tomcat. That's cool. But Tomcat also requires Java. So in the Tomcat module, or the class, we would declare the Java class, and then we would order the Java class first. Because we thought this component module should be everything to everyone. It should set up everything about Tomcat and be done. And that's where our faulty logic lied. When you do this, you tightly couple yourself to another module. And sometimes to your own custom module that ain't nobody going to use, right? So then we thought, oh, we'll just have a bunch of really good modules. And we can still do this as long as you use all of our modules. And it turns out that's not what people want either. It also turns out setting these dependencies inside this base component module is the wrong way to go about it. Because in reality, the Tomcat class shouldn't care about Java. It should assume that, yes, it needs to be set up. And ultimately, on the machine, when you try and run Tomcat, if you don't have Java, you're going to have a problem. But that should be documented but not solved in the component module. Because again, what if you want to swap out this Tomcat module for another one that somebody did better? Well, if theirs has a dependency on their Java module, now you have issues. You've lost that ability to be encapsulated so that you can just swap out components, right? The better way to do it is one of these ways. First, everything we've already showed you before, and then set up the dependency here. If you have a dependency, put it down there. Because remember, the profile should be everything necessary to actually set up that piece of technology, including all of the dependencies on disparate pieces of technology if they need. Because when you include the profile, you shouldn't have to know that you need to order those two things. It should already be done for you. But the problem that you should be noticing here is this. Do you think Tomcat is the only thing that actually uses Java? Heck no. Java's in use everywhere, right? And it turns out you can write it once and run it on every platform without any issues. Which is not why I still have a job, by the way. But the problem is we're using the parameterized class syntax here. And we can't use that more than once in a compiled catalog. But what if you have something like Jira or some other app that requires Java and also Tomcat? Like, which one wins? Which one's going to do the Java dance here for you? And you run into that conflict. And the way you solve that is to bump it up a level. Create a profile for Java, okay? Inside that profile, do hierarchicals for everything you care about, then declare the Java component module, and be done. Your profile is now your idempotent wrapper class. You can include it from every profile that needs it done, but the implementation of Java is only in one place in that profile. So if you need to make changes, you can change the implementation at the profile level, but include it inside other places. In this case, you just need to order it according to the profile and not necessarily the base class, okay? Quick question.
Yeah, is there a reason to avoid requiring the Java profile to ensure that it happens first?
Is there a reason to avoid requiring the Java profile so that it happens first?
Yeah, instead of
Oh, yeah. Are you asking, couldn't you just say require and then not have to do the ordering up there? Yeah, absolutely. You could use the require function, which includes it but also sets a dependency on this, the profile for Tomcat. It would give you the same fundamentally-ish thing, because it's going to happen before the profile, and in this case, the profile only includes Tomcat. So, yeah, good question. All right. Yes?
So, does it mean we need to submit the profiles, since it's a module, into the Puppet forge also, and that's how we manage, or?
The question is, should you also upload your profiles to the Puppet Forge too if you create a profiles module? Is that the question? No, in reality, you probably shouldn't do that because that's your custom bit of data, that's your implementation, right? If you have a based component module for Tomcat, everybody can see that, but if your profiles module, especially if it has like your keys and stuff in there, no, you're gonna keep those to yourself. Usually, I don't know of anybody or many people that put profiles up on the Forge. Yeah. One more question for right now. Go.
What is your opinion about using this profiles pattern versus data binding to just simply have it do the right thing based on hierarchy?
My opinion on using this pattern, other than the automatic parameter lookup and Hiera data bindings. I'm glad you asked. So for those people that aren't aware, in Puppet 3, we introduced this thing called automatic parameter lookup and data bindings. And what it means is, for a class up here of like Tomcat, if you have a parameter called version, and you have Hiera set up on your master, you can, in the Hiera hierarchy, just say Tomcat : version inside Hiera, and then set a value. And then if you just include the Tomcat class, it'll do an automatic lookup for Hiera for that value. So here's the deal about the automatic parameter lookup. It works, right? But it's magic. And for people that are new to Puppet and for debugging purposes, you can easily miss that it happened and not follow it, right? I will always err on the side of debuggability and legibility for people that are new to Puppet, because I will never work at any one place for any long period of time, right? Somebody's going to ultimately inherit your code. So the automatic parameter lookup, if you're a small, like very agile shop with a lot of good ops guys that follow the whole Puppet practice, totally works. Works really, really well, but you have to know that it happens. I like to do this syntax of setting the variable because I have found with people that are new to Puppet, this allows them to actually look up and find out what this Hiera magic is. Because even if instead of going to Tomcat version equals Hiera, what if I put the Hiera lookup down here as the value of the Tomcat class's version? You could do that and avoid the step, but I've actually found that people, when you have that Hiera lookup as the value of a parameter, get really confused. The function as the other side of the value, for some reason, throws them in a way that setting a variable does not. So again, they all functionally work the same. I just tend to avoid it. So good question for right now. I'll come back in a second. Let's move on a little bit and summarize profiles. Again, profiles are where you're going to be spending most of your work. It's good to ask questions on them. Remember that Hiera is going to give you that business-specific data, all those bits of data that are different around your machines. Your goal in your refactoring your modules and everything is to make it so you can use the same module for every dev, test, or prod, but just extract the bits of data that are different, right? If you have a module where you need different modules in dev than in prod, you need to really think hard about how you can refactor that to make it happen. And in some case, maybe you can't do that, but that's the issue. Hiera for business-specific data. Proprietary resources, things like certs, like keys, like whatever, they go in the profile, not in the component module. Interclass dependencies and containment, yes, please. Yes, please. And then treat them like implementation libraries. You just include a profile and you get what you want. It's done. Everything should be in there. You shouldn't have to know anything additional to all of that. Okay. So the last level in the stack, we've gone from component modules all the way up to finally roles. Okay? And roles are just business-specific things for Puppet. Profiles were technology-specific, a profile for JBoss. Roles are according to your business. They're classification. Classification is a funny little made-up word that we created that means how do you know when a node checks in which Puppet classes should be assigned to it? All right, classification. And Luke mentioned earlier that we have this new node classifier that allows you to do smart rules things based on regex. And the only thing that I could think of was, oh my God, regex. Like, I can't even follow certain regex. Like, but that is cool technology that we didn't have before, what, like 9? So we did roles and profiles to solve this problem because consider the host name conundrum. How do you name your machines? Well, obviously, the first one is our Denver UAT application server number 6 that has PCI compliance. Duh. Right? And you're laughing because that's how you do things too. Denuadap 6. And then also, even better than that, it's like, that's Falcor. We employ a flying dragon to be our proxy server. Got it. Think about this. Like when you have host names for machines, people impart a lot of data inside there because it's your way to determine what a machine is, like what it's supposed to do. For example, where it is. It's Denver. What application tier? It's UAT. What kind of machine? It's an app server. It's the 6th in a cluster, and it's got PCI compliance, because darn those credit cards, right? In reality, that's what roles actually mean to help you with in Puppet. Roles are meant to be the bits of data you need to determine what a machine is, minus the bits of data that Hiera provides you, okay? Because consider that. Denver, well, that's already in Hiera. That's the location tier, the location level of the hierarchy. We've got that taken care of. Wrong way. Like UAT, that's an application tier. App server, PCI. Okay, roles, : app server, : PCI. Okay? And that's our role name. I have seen people name roles according to things like we're the ops team. We have our own roles for how we set up things. And we're the run team, we're the dev team, right? It's bits of splits. Roles are meant to be there to allow you to differentiate what classes should be assigned to your nodes. Every role allows you to add more classes onto your node. So, you know, the differences between Denver and San Francisco usually aren't adding a different class. It might be different data, right? In Denver, we have this, and you know, San Francisco, we have that. Same thing with application tier. Usually you're not adding additional things in dev that you are in test. You might be, but maybe it's just data, right? But roles are meant to be that sort of thing. And roles is arguably one of the only places in the Puppet language that inheritance actually makes some semblance of sense. Because inheritance in Puppet is not the same as inheritance in object-oriented programming. Inheritance to Puppet is like a series of Russian dolls. It's just buckets inside buckets all the way down. It's not, you know, is-a relationships, things like that. So what I've seen people set up is this. They will create a roles module, and in the base class for roles, they'll put everything inside here that every machine in their organization needs, right? Every machine needs the security base. Every machine needs the users. It needs all the operating system settings, the whatever. Everybody gets these things. And then you work your way down the namespace. Roles, : app server inherits from roles. So it gets everything that the roles class has. Plus, you get the profile for Tomcat, our app for Shibboleth, and then we order things. So dependencies and ordering things here allow you to order relative profiles to one another. You may find that you won't need dependencies at the roles level because maybe profiles are really functionally independent, or maybe you'll find that you do need dependencies. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other there. And then you can work your way down. Adding the PCI moniker allows you to get the profiles PCI or something, right? Now, this, whenever I see it, tweaks a little something in my brain because, again, I err on the side of debuggability. And the issue is if I pull up roles app server PCI and I'm new to Puppet, I go, you get one class called PCI? Like, that's what you get? Well, if I don't know what inherits means, I got a bigger problem than Puppet. But if I don't know what it means in terms of Puppet, then I have missed all the turtles all the way down. So guess what? You don't have to use inheritance. you can say and build it up at every level. Now, the problem with building it up at every level is, oh my God, more typing, VI, right? Which, when I started this job, I did not know VI. The easiest way to learn VI is to actually start training a class and then try and move your way around and then have a bunch of people go, $, DT, D slash, the other slash. No, not the Windows slash. D/D, shift, move, right? And I can't learn Emacs because I got 10. Like, that's all I got. Nothing. So anyway, oh no, my God, it's more typing. God help you. Again, you're including at all levels. If you over and over and include everything else, we know that Puppet's not going to have a problem. If it increases legibility and people understand it better, do the additional typing. But honestly, it's up to you. Functionally to Puppet don't care. It's the same thing. So you use inheritance or just keep building on and on and on as long as you would like, okay? Again, refresh, rehash. Roles are like your host name data minus your Hiera data. Again, I went over that before. They are technology independent. You have roles, : application server, and you have profiles, : Tomcat. Why? Because if one day somebody decides we're not using Tomcat, we're using WebLogic because I played a really good game of golf with this vendor over here. Are they a sponsor? I mean, because it is a better value and more enterprise. Then you can go into the role and you can swap out the profile for Tomcat for one for WebLogic, right? It's encapsulated. You can swap in pieces and parts. It's how it should ultimately be, right? Roles are for classification. The goal is for every one of your nodes that when they come to life, you classify them with a single role and you are done. Classification is complete for that node. For the life of the node, or for the life that it is that kind of role, it's classified with it. You don't have to change it. But if you have to change what the role does, that's in version control. It's a manifest. You add or subtract the profile, right? So a lot of people really, really worry about classification. How am I going to do it? What if it changes? I need RBAC. But if you set it up with roles and profiles and it just gets a classification, it becomes really, really easy. And now, with our new node classifier, you can actually use attributes about the node to automatically assign them roles if you really, really want to. Or, if you guys prefer the GUI path instead of the manifests, you can build functionally the same thing that the roles do inside the GUI with your profiles. Because again, roles is just a classification mechanism. You don't have to use it. Profiles is going to help you out. You can use our node classifier for role logic. The question was, in essence, what he was talking about with the groups would be what our roles would be? Yes. Ultimately, that would be it. And we've had discussions internally about this, like how is it going to map out to be, because we want it to really work for you guys. Okay? And again, inheritance makes sense, or it doesn't. See if I care. Right? And now workflow. Again, because I made pretty pictures and shrunk them, now we just added more. Here is the bit that you probably cared about, and you probably waited like 77 minutes of my BS and stories to be like, oh, now we can talk about R10K. And then I'll be like, yeah, they already did. You missed it. Sorry. Workflow. So one of the hardest things about Puppet is how do I use it with more than just one person and make it work? And how can I actually do it so we don't have to change how we do business and do work? And that's what I mean by workflow. And one of the first things you realize when you get started with Puppet is you pull down some modules, you play around, you litter your modules directory, and then all of a sudden you forget what modules you actually cared about. And you forget what versions of those modules you're actually using. And then somebody upgrades one. And you find out really quickly what modules you care about and what versions there. So you need a way to do what we call module pinning, like lock it down. These are the modules I want. this is what I care about. And for that, we have something called the Puppet file with a capital P, because we've got make file, rake file, file, like we might as well have a Puppet file too. Puppet file came with the librarian Puppet project, and it was an awesome idea and something we needed because it gave us the ability to say what modules we wanted and also what versions of those modules we cared about. So the Puppet file just looks a little something like this. You can say, I want the Puppet Labs Apache module. These modules come from the Forge. By default, every time whatever application you run that fetches modules, be it librarian Puppet or R10K, it will check and make sure you have the most recent version. What if you want a specific version? Well, you add a comma right here, and then you add the version string, like 0.2. I meant to put that up there, but I must have deleted it. So these modules come from the Forge. You can also pull modules from either GitHub or any Git repository server, like something internally if you want, don't care. And you can say, this is the notify me module. We get it from here, and we're pinning it to, in this case, this is a commit ID and not a tag, or else you are terrible as a person. Though that would be fun to tag things like that, right? Why not? What? Why not? Sure, let's do it. So it's a reference to Git, because remember, like to Git, a tag, a commit ID, a branch, they're all references. It don't care. Honey Badger, right? So now every time you run R10K or librarian, it will ensure that this module is pulled down from this Git repository and make sure we are parked at that commit. Done. Period. End of story. Same thing with this one down here, all right? So it solves the problem of what you care about. But that's not the only thing that R10K does. And again, R10K, bad name, good robot. It's funny, Adrian Thiebaud, who you'll see on IRC as Finch, he did a talk just before mine with Zach Smith, and they did a whole thing on R10K. Check the video out for that. We also did a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we talked in depth about R10K. I'm not really going to go too terribly in depth about it. I mean, I've got extra time I can show you. I've got like a whole demo prepared and everything. But those are other materials to get more data. Again, I have a blog post on everything, whatever. But R10K functionally does two things for you. One is it ensures your modules are on your Puppet master server based on a Puppet file, okay? It makes sure that every time it runs, that stuff is the way that it is. And anything that anybody else puts in those directory, it clears out. It's very helpful like that. It also allows you to dynamically create Puppet environments based on a repository, right? You set up a Git repository that contains your Puppet file. If you do that, R10K, being the helpful person that it does, works. This repository we have come to taken and naming the control repository because it controls all your Puppet environments, and we are a simple folk that suck at naming things. So you have the control repo, and you can put as much or as little as you want in here. By default, you really need a Puppet file because that's the thing that tells you what modules you need. But you can also put a manifests directory with a site.pp in there, so that you can have per environment site.pps. And you can even put all your Hiera data inside here so that every dynamic environment you create can have its own Hiera data store. So now if you need to change Hiera data relative to a new Puppet environment, you can do them both at the same time, okay? But by default, you just need the Puppet file. And the way R10K works is it says, cool, I look at this repo, and every branch that I have of it, I'm going to create a new folder on the Puppet master server, which is going to be a Puppet environment. And then, for every one of those folders, I'm going to consult the Puppet file and spit out a bunch of modules in a modules directory below it. It's really a giant collection of like make-dir-p and git commands. Like, it's spit, twine, and like finch at 3 in the morning on Red Bull or something. That's what it is, which is why it works. That's R10K. And we have come to using it because it just makes sense. And recently, our engineering team had a problem. And the problem is the old style of Puppet environments that you put into puppet.conf and you iterated upon them. it was hard to actually determine how many environments were in there because a lot of people stopped using those and abused $environment in Puppet.conf. They would say, our module path is Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet Environments, $environment. So Puppet really didn't know how many environments it had. And when we were building our node classifier, we needed to track all of the environments so that we could list them dynamically or graphically, right? So we came up with this concept known as directory-based environments, and that was just recently rolled out. Directory-based environments was based on the same Git workflow, and it works by saying, choose a directory on your Puppet master server. Every one of those, every subdirectory in there, I'm going to consider an environment. And inside those subdirectories, I'm going to look for a modules directory, and that's where your modules live. I'm going to look for an environment.conf that allows me to specify all sorts of different things, right? So the directory-based environments, new thing that was rolled out in Puppet 3. Something, was 3.6, yeah, was based on R10K. So if you say, hey, Gary, we're already using R10K, what about this whole directory-based environment thing? Well, I just put a blog post up on how to migrate over to them, and that's actually what I'm going to talk about a little bit today with a demo. Ooh, right? So what I have here is just Tmux and Puppet Enterprise. And I have a Red Hat box here that already has Puppet installed. God, that's small. Oh, that ain't helping me over there. Do a little something like that, right? OK, so I have cloned down to var temp what's called Puppet repository. And in reality, if I go to, how about, can I get an amen? There we go. If I go to github.com Larizza Puppet _repository, you can see, if I make that a little bit bigger, I have this Puppet repository. And inside it, it has a Puppet file, but it also has like a manifest directory with a site.bp in it. It also has some manifests in here, of which there's one that lets you configure R10K automatically. Ooh, like you can run Puppet apply against that, and it'll set up R10K. And configure directory-based environments. Based on the R10K setup there, this will actually set up Puppet to just use directory-based environments, and you're done, right? And there is also inside there a Hiera.yaml, which has the data dir that links back to the correct one, and then also just a little bit of hierarchy there. So what I'm going to do first is Puppet apply the configure R10K and see if we have internet. You also get that deprecation warning, which only really bothers me recently. That was in, I think, Puppet 3.3, because we're making changes to the languages. And based on our internet connection here, we are going to pull down the Ruby gem for R10K, install it in the Puppet Enterprise Ruby gem, and then go ahead and configure it to use my Puppet repository. If you were to use this on your own, the only bit you really have to change inside configure R10K is this, the remote. By default, it's using my Puppet repository on GitHub. Change it to whatever control repo you end up using, if you end up using one, and you should, right? So that works. We have a rich R10K, which shows up, which is good. Now we need to configure directory-based environments. So we can do that with Puppet apply configure directory environments. All this is going to do is make some changes to Puppet.conf, configuring environment path, base module path, things like that. Incidentally, if you're here and you don't know about something called INI setting, it is a way to model individual bits in any INI files that are out there. So you can just say in the main section, environment path should be that. If you've been doing it the old way, that's like worth coming to this section for. I'm moving Hiera.yaml to Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet Hiera.yaml because it needs to be there. Yep. And the last thing that I really need to do is nothing. Service PE HTTPD restart. because I changed Hiera.yaml. Hiera.yaml is a singleton setting. Every time you change it, you need to restart the service so that it picks up the changes. Now, etc r10k.yaml is the configuration file for r10k. And the way that it works is basically it says, here's where I'm going to expand out all the directories, and then here's the remote that you have. Like, done, right? And we can do r10k and do whatever we want. Now, if you don't want to use the dynamic environment creation portion of r10k, you don't have to. It's almost useful just to have the Puppet file, because you can do r10k Puppet file install, and based on the Puppet file in the directory, all it's going to do is pull down the modules at their version and deploy them into a modules directory relative to the Puppet file. So if you don't want dynamic stuff but you need a way to track your modules, like, there you go. So go ahead and use it for that. But we've set up r10k, and I do r10k deploy environment -pv, P for Puppet file, because you want to expand out that, and -v for verbose. And it's going to tell me it's going to deploy the environment to production, and then do all of that. And then also, it's doing another environment. I have two branches to that repo, one called production and one called webinar env, because this is incidentally the same one I used on the webinar. And what it does is expands out to etc Puppet Labs Puppet environments. etc Puppet Labs Puppet environments. Hey, there's production and webinar env. Webinar env has all of that. Now, everything in the subdirectory of your branch is everything that's in the repo. This is really awesome, because if you want a site.pp, you just create a manifest directory, and directory-based environments already looks there. The same thing for the Hiera data. We've mapped it. So the cool thing is, like, one-stop shop. It's literally everything in an environment needed in a folder, and so it's all stored. The only thing that's not there, like seriously, the only thing is Hiera.yaml. Why? We haven't refactored Hiera to use it in that way. It's a singleton setting, so it's only read the first time Puppet server starts up. The bug is open on one of my blog posts. You can follow the track of that, but that's the one exception to the rule. If you look inside webinar env site.pp, I have just classified this node with include profiles, notify a message. I'll include profiles, all profiles, notify a message does is it does a Hiera lookup for something called message, and then it declares the notify me class, and it passes the message. The notify me class just takes the message and pipes it to a notify, which just takes an argument message, which is the message. I wrapped a resource with a class with a hierarchical for, I don't know, like just because you can type of thing. And in my, let's say, Hiera.yaml, you notice one of the levels here is application tier. I don't have a custom factor fact for application tier. And I could fake it, but in reality, with factor 175, I can just create factors confter, so etc Puppet Labs factor. I can create a facts.d file, and then inside there just say, like app.txt, application tier equals dev, right? By doing that, you can actually just factor-p application tier, and you can create yourself a custom fact, which returns back dev, just based on a file. So that's a quick little thing that I'll do. If I look in webinar env in Hiera data, I have a dev.yaml, which just says this overrides the dev message, and the same thing for Hiera data common. It just says this node is using common data. All right. Now, to talk about directory-based environments. Let's look at Puppet.conf. Because in Puppet.conf, we have this new setting here called base module path. Base module path is meant to be a module path that is shared among all environments, right? So in the past, when you created a new environment, you had to say, like, module path is the new one. Oh, yeah, and opt Puppet share, Puppet modules, because Puppet Enterprise, and this one over here. You had to repeat that. Base module path allows you to define a module path we can refer to later. In this case, conftr resolves out to be Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet, or Etsy Puppet in the open source, and then the modules directory, and then opt Puppet share Puppet modules. Okay? The environment path is the path to the directory where every subdirectory will be a new environment. That is the directory Puppet is going to read and consider every subfolder an environment. What you can do is once you have those set up, you can actually use Puppet module list. And Puppet module list just kind of works. There we go, right? Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet environments production modules comes first. This is the order by which they're searched. And then Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet modules, and then opt Puppet share Puppet modules. So if you want to make sure you get this right, you can kind of just use our tools, which is a totally new concept. I can even do the same thing. Puppet module list, environment is webinar env. And guess what? Same thing. Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet environments / webinar _ env. And then it lists them there, which is neat. Yep, question? Absolutely, the order by which it's read. So if you look at Puppet.conf, it works like a path environment variable. So colons. So yep, right there. So it will, and the order by which it's configured is this. So inside the environments directory, there is an environment.conf. Environment.conf is a totally new concept. It's something new with directory-based environments, but it allows you to define a director or an environment module path. And it allows you to do relative paths. So you can just say modules, and that's relative to the environments directory. Okay? So I can say modules : base module path. That's why we did base module path, because we just refer to it everywhere. Then you don't even have to change this thing. It just works for every environment. The config version is something that runs every time you do a Puppet run on the master. When it compiles the catalog, it evaluates this statement, and whatever the standard out return is, that becomes your config version string. In this case, it is going to be the most recent commit ID for this environment, right? Awesome. Now, we had a problem when we used directory-based environments that config version was global to every environment, so it never really worked. In this case, now it's going to be relative to what your environments.get directory is, right? So basically, your control repo. It lets you track your control repo. One small thing, you need to use a full path, because remember, this environment.conf uses relative paths. So if you type in git here, it looks for the git binary in the environment directory. And the environment timeout. That's also something brand new. What that is every 3 minutes it refreshes the cache of environment data. Okay? Because it doesn't consistently refresh, that would be like a hit on the Puppet master server. So if you are cloning out these environments sooner than 3 minutes, you have a problem. But if you're testing something out, you'll have to restart PE/HTTPD to let it resync up, okay? Else, that's adjustable. And you can even set it down to, I think, like 0 or something, too. Okay? Nothing on my sleeve. If I do Puppet agent-t with environment of webinar env, I expect it to actually run, which would be great. And I expect to get a message from Hiera that's overridden for the dev environment, which, if I actually followed my demo correctly, gives us that. This overrides the dev message. If I do another Puppet agent-t run, but instead I include an environment that doesn't exist, well, that's going to be a problem. But let's go ahead and just say etc Puppet Labs factor fax.d app. Let's change this instead of dev to be like UAT, something that there is nothing in Hiera. If I do that, then I should get a different message, the one that comes from common, right? All I'm doing is just proving that Hiera still works, and life is golden there, which this node is using common data, okay? Now, what R10K gives you is the ability to clone out that repo and the ability to branch it and create new dynamic environments. Like I said, I really don't want to go into the whole R10K workflow because we did it. And today at 5:10 p.m., Phil Zimmerman from Time Warner Cable is actually showing his R10K killer workflow, which is really cool. I went on site with him, and he showed me it, and I was like, that's really neat. You should talk about that. So based on that, he wrote a talk. It's 5, not 5:10? Or you just... Oh, really? Yeah. They gave me the wrong time. Cool. Well, I'm done anyway. So thank you. That is that. Check him out. In summary, basically, read the manual. Everything that I talked about. My slides are up. I will be up here and walked outside to answer questions. I'm sorry I misread the time.
No, so you've got 5 minutes for questions. I just wanted you to have the time.
Oh, okay. I thought like there. Okay, screw that then. We've got 5 minutes. Who has questions for the good of the order? You, sir. Why should you not use git tags because of the git commit hash? When you set a tag, can you change a tag what reference, like what commit hash it's based on? Yes. That's the answer. Somebody can be Luke and use the force and change a commit tag, and then all of a sudden all of your Puppet master servers have changes. That's why, right? Commit hash is usually easier for people to see. Yep. Question is, Hiera and modules, ever going to happen? I don't know. I only work here. The guys that ask that about our engineering, talk to the engineering platform team. Ari has a concept where in modules, instead of using the params class, you set up a local Hiera data folder, and then you can have params read from there. Honestly, if you're really good, that's really difficult for me to debug now. And for people new to Puppet, it becomes a new thing. Like you have a hierarchy for your module, and then you have a hierarchy for all your specific data. Which hierarchy is read where? Like, again, I have a blog post that talks about using data in modules. I'm not really a fan of it. We will see something to make modules probably be decoupled from params, but you'll have to talk with the engineering side. I don't have any secret information. Questions? You, sir.
Secrets in Hiera data, like passwords and stuff like that?
Yeah. Secrets and data in Hiera data. What about passwords? There is a Hiera backend called Hiera-eYAML and one that has Hiera-eYAML GPG. Tom Polton created it. We use it in the PS team when we go out and do engagements. Like he's really responsive. It's a really well done module. But you're still talking security through obscurity here because you can GPG encrypt data and just encrypt data inside Hiera files right alongside plain text. But the keys still need to be on the Puppet master server to be able to read that data. Now, you can lock it down to the user that Puppet runs on, but what it gives you is the ability to store encrypted data in something you can put up on a repo so casual viewers don't just get it. Look up eYAML and look up eYAML GPG.
Question about making profiles publicly available. So a lot of component modules, they're very granular intentionally, but I'd like to be able to represent the relationship between the different components and share those with people. Is there any kind of suggestions you have for that? What I can write to log?
Yeah, the question was like profiles, like if you want to share how you use component modules and then how they're related to each other, what about publishing those? We've actually had conversations with our module team about publishing like Puppet profiles that will use some of the commonly based modules that you can just pull it in and it sets every bit as long as you have Hiera data. You'd also need like a Puppet file to be able to specify the modules and also like a Hiera data structure. You're still kind of getting your fingers in a lot of areas, but I like the way you think, and talk to the module team people about that because I think there is something there. In every module, we used to have a directory we called tests because we suck at naming things, that really should be called examples. Profiles is kind of the new generation of examples, how to use it, and I think there's something there. Couple minutes? Cool. Keep going. Sure, the question was component modules like Java. What if I want multiple versions of Java, like alternatives on a machine? How would I go about doing that? You'd have to look at the Java module, and it would have to be able to install multiple versions of Java on a machine, of which I think our newly launched Puppet Labs Java 1 does. In that case, you would pull that data from Hiera for every version you need, like how many versions and what they are, and that would just get passed on down. Yep. Think we're good. Okay, so it's all on there. I will fix the bit.ly link. I promise. I'll be outside to answer questions. Thank you all. Help me pay my bill. For those people recording, give me 1 second. I'm just going to show something quickly for everybody here, and then we can start recording. Because usually when I get started, like I have all these little jittery things in. So I thought I would tell you a story from this week. So this week, on not last night, but the night before, I was down in Mountain View. They had a big concert going on down there called Beyond Wonderland, that Shoreline Amphitheater. And we got out at around 11:20 p.m. or so. So you need to get back up from Mountain View to San Francisco at 11:10, and the last Caltrain is already passed. It's about 36 miles away, okay? So you pop open like a Lyft. You go, if you use the Lyft app, you know, people drive cars, can take you around. So there's no Lyft around. So I open up Uber, UberX, that'll work. No UberX around, like it's busy. But they do have the Uber Black Town Car, the little more bougie, expensive one. I was like, whatever, it was me and a friend. And it opens it up and it's in surge pricing. So surge pricing, for those that don't know, it's a multiplier on the regular base amount. And usually it's like 1.5, things are getting busy. It was a 3 times multiplier. We're driving from South Bay to here, like 36 miles, Mountain View to here, okay? Black car, surge pricing 3 times. How much do you think that ride cost me? $300, what else? $550, what else? $1,000. We have $524.79 for a ride from 11:50 p.m. to 12:35 a.m. And a black tire, paid by, and 50 cents right there for sharing the ride. That's where they screw you with the 50 cents. The base fare was $8, don't worry. It was $137 for the distance, $29 for the time. We get in the car, and we're like, do you mind if we play music? And I shit you not, the guy was like, I don't care what you do in here. He was like, you can smoke, you can do whatever you want. And I was like, how much do you think this is gonna cost? Like $120? He's like, man, I don't know. That is how you know when you get out of the Uber and you walk. I could have paid my friend to like piggyback me up here. But, okay, so anyway, title slide, now we can record. Hi, everybody.